connecting. Wait for it. All right, says we are good to go. It says we are live. So we'll take a moment. We'll have folks who will start joining us for the session. So we'll give folks a moment to join. So with that, good morning, folks. If you are just joining, we have Brettany. She's back. Fantastic. That's really what I was stalling for.
It actually snatched me and like dropped me in the room with like instructional design.
Yes, it's okay. You're here. We are live. We are in our session, and you are in the right place now, friend. So we are delighted to have you back. All right, so with that, welcome everyone. Good morning. I see we have a handful of folks in the room. I'm sure we will have more folks joining because our session just sent out a broadcast of please join. So I see folks joining. So with that, let me introduce myself quickly. So my name is Jessica Siegel. I'm joining you from Atlanta, Georgia, and I will be moderating our panel this morning. I work full-time in L&D at a global software and SaaS company. I do all of our onboarding, training, corporate-wide initiatives like DE&I. So with that, let me quickly have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we will dive in. So let's start because she's first on my screen, but the other Jessica, not to be confused with this Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica McFadden. I'm the head of marketing at Stories Incorporated, and we are a recruitment, marketing, and employer brand content studio. And one of the things we do is go into organizations and capture their real cultures of inclusion, diversity, and belonging.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, Brettany, I'm going to let you follow up since you guys are kind of connected.
Yeah, my name is Brettany Payne. I also work at Stories Inc. with Jessica, and I am a project manager and content strategist. So I help storytellers tell stories.
Awesome. Love that. And then I'll let Sara go because she's unmuted and ready to go.
Hi, I'm Sara. I'm based in the Netherlands and I run my own company. And what I do is I create spaces for people to be transformative. So people gather and they share stories on collaboration, on connection, but also on conflict. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Last but not least, round us out, Lorna.
Hello, I'm Lorna King. I'm based in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. I am an employer brand specialist in oil and gas. I came into this field after 10 years in digital marketing and healthcare after I trained to be a coach, and I realized I really wanted to make a difference in the HR space.
Fantastic. Well, we are in for a treat this morning. And as a reminder to our attendees, if you have not used AirMeet before, feel free to, you can share reactions. So if somebody says something you really like on the bottom of your screen, you can share reactions if you love, if you have a great idea. So feel free to use the reactions button. It's one way you can communicate as we are going through. And then you're also welcome to use the chat to comment, share any questions, and I will be checking the chat throughout our time this morning and making sure that any questions that we can answer, we will get to. So with that, let me start us off by throwing out a question, just kind of framing the work of DE&I. So how can an organization, because some of you are internal, some of you, Sara, it looks like you've been internal, sounds like you've been internal, but now run your own company. Now, how can an organization really take action to embody inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging? I mean, the work of DE&I isn't new, but the focus and limelight on it, in the past year plus, it's really taken center stage. So I see Brettany smiling. Do you want to start? You want to kick us off, Brettany? Oh, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? All right, so Brettany's not going to start us off. Are you guys all muted now and you can't unmute yourself? This is going great. Oh, Jessica can, there we go. Fantastic. Jessica, you can start us off.
Lorna, do you want to take it? I see she's unmuted too, and she does. She helps internally.
Yeah. So why don't you start us off, Lorna?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the major things that people often overlook is the measurement. Everybody gets really excited about the initiatives and, creating all this content. I think measurement of your actual diversity is so important, because the way we perceive different groups sometimes make them seem more prominent than they may already be, and those biases live within us. So you need to look at the data and then follow up the education piece as well. Make sure that people understand what inclusion is versus diversity, to make sure that we're giving people an environment that they can thrive in, that they belong, and you're moving that culture. And that's another measure as well, right? You can measure culture to see what kind of environment you are creating for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think I would actually add fabulous Laura about the data. And I think, at least my experience with facilitating dialogues on Black Lives Matter and all kinds of really emotional charged subjects has been, what is the boundary that we're creating as well? When it comes to belonging, it's a definition that we're all shaping together. So it's about the data of what's the current situation, but it's also about where do you want to go? So what is that vision and how do we get there? And in that process of it, whose voice matter and whose voices is like a whisper we can't really hear? And can we really lean in to collect those voices? And that's also warm data, and to work with it when it comes to the establishment of the new culture. What about you, Jessica?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that, because employees are the best representation of culture, and their stories, their voices are so important, because an employee's words and their personal perspectives are going to provide so much insight to their fellow employees, their colleagues, candidates that you want to bring to your organization to increase your inclusion and make your culture even more exciting and more vibrant. So even though perspectives and stories are so unique, that can just only help your organization grow. And my colleague Brettany speaks with employee storytellers every day.
Yeah, sorry about that. And I just wanted to piggyback off of what Jessica said. So employee stories are almost like reviews. When you buy something off Amazon, because everyone shops on Amazon these days, you always scroll down to the bottom and read the reviews. Like, regardless of what the company says in the description about the actual item, like, you want to see the item in someone's home, or for me, if it's clothes, like, I want to see the clothes on someone that looks like me. Like, how is this shirt going to look on someone my size? And that's exactly what potential employees want to see. They want to see people who are actually working in their roles or working at your company that look like them or sound like them, or that they can resonate with. But and they believe them. They're more believable than the company saying this is a great place to work, because us as employer branding or recruitment marketing professionals, we have a vested interest in saying nice things about the company. So yeah, storytellers are the way to go.
Yeah, and you don't have to oversell where your culture is now to show potential candidates or employees where the company wants to go. So, employee stories can show what's really happening in your organization, and also your commitment towards the progress that Lorna and Sara talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been such a limelight on the belonging piece of DE&I, especially lately. And be it good or be it bad, I think one of the things that we all experienced during COVID is the lines between our personal and professional lives were blurred in a way that we weren't so used to, whether it's, seeing what somebody's home looks like and their personal taste, or, the pets running in, or like sitting on our laps during meetings, or like the tiny humans, or our partners, popping in. We got to see a glimpse into people's lives in a way that even those who might be more private, we got to experience more of that, during COVID than we're used to. So going forward, even, the notion of bringing your true, authentic self to work and feeling comfortable, that sense of belonging, is just so key and so important, So how do we take that experience that we've had during COVID and, now as some folks are returning to the office or hybrid models, how do we carry that going forward and, let people know that like, we want you to bring your whole self to work, as much as you're comfortable of, and like, we accept you and celebrate you for all that you are.
I think one of the things I've really noticed, particularly going from the virtual environment to the office environment again, is the different sorts of backgrounds. We often talk about diversity in terms of, gender, race, and these types of things. But you've also got things like the introversion-extroversion scale, and traditionally extroverts have been much more sort of appealing and lauded, whereas when you go into the virtual space, you have different ways you can interact with people. People have started doing polls, they've started doing chats, and then you have the presenter mode. So it gives people of all different confidence levels, backgrounds to have their voice. So I would love to see how we can take that into the office space going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's even the playing field for introverts. And then I also have gotten lots of feedback from my colleagues who work remote that they've loved it the past year because everybody's on the same level. And it's not like 8 people on their team are sitting in a room and they feel left out. So I think that's another interesting way that COVID kind of leveled the playing field and everybody felt like they belonged and it was an even playing field. So there's just so much work to do as we're reopening offices to figure out how we keep that playing field level.
Sure.
Thank you for addressing that, Jessica. And I think what's often not spoke about when it comes to the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is also the power dynamic. So like we're working hybrid, who's the in crowd and who's the out crowd? And also bringing your authenticity means letting your guard down in a way. And how is that punished or even rewarded in a culture? And we need to talk about that. And power is not a bad thing in a way. Power is just the capacity to get things done. But by creating this culture of how are we viewing power, and not only as in someone else's power, but my own power in creating what I want to envision and together, then that's how we create this playing field, this level playing field. And by also, just like here now, for example, English is not my native language. So there's something that I need time to translate what's being said into what I want to express. And maybe there'll be neurodiverse people as well, or people with different capacities. So without knowing that, there's always a norm, and it's not good or bad, but it's just how things goes. And just to make the implicit explicit, it's creating the sense of belonging, but not just like one taste in a way, but you have different blends and people can vibe together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. Jessica, Brettany, anything to add?
One thing that we did do, because we captured culture from distributed teams remotely. So with COVID, we couldn't go into all of the offices we wanted to because of safety and everybody was working remotely. So it was really important for us to capture that real, distributed team, remote working cultures and still communicate with audiences. And so that was incredible, and we have loved doing that. And so much of Brettany's day, I know, is spent capturing stories remotely, and that won't change. We can go into offices to get real employee stories, but also get them from so many more people than we normally would with the globally distributed team. But sometimes people don't want to share their backgrounds, and they want to keep their privacy. So Brettany and her team strategized a cool way that we've been able to protect people or, organizations that didn't want to show the backgrounds. I'm kind of like giving you a leading Brettany all day.
Yeah, I see Sara asks ways to include people on their own terms. I'm gonna assume that question is for like when we're getting stories. So people are different. So the story sessions, they last about 20 minutes of actually recording. Sometimes they go 45 minutes. I am a chatty person by nature. And sometimes people come on and they're like, 2-word answers. Yes, no, green tomorrow. So if I find that you don't want to talk about your work or your culture, I'll start talking to you about something that you want to talk to about. Like I did a story session in Chicago where she was very shy. She was young. We started talking about her favorite Harry Potter characters for about 15 minutes, like completely wasted 15 minutes talking about Harry Potter. And I was like, okay, so let's talk about your manager. What house in Harry Potter would she be in? And then we lead into the culture question. So it's making them feel comfortable. And some of that is just, I don't get the same in person hour and a half with them before we start talking. So I try to send them emails beforehand. I send a prep deck, but when we get on the actual call, if I feel like they're giving me 1 word or 2 word answers, then I talk about something that they want to talk about. And then after they feel comfortable, I go back around to my questions.
Yeah, and we also sent them green screens. So that way, if they didn't want to show their background or that didn't make them feel safe, that, you know, we could kind of superimpose a thing. So that was another way, you know, just people's comfort is one of the most important parts about inclusion.
Yeah. And I let them know, like, if they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to share this, or I don't know if this is okay. Like I assure them that, you know, Jessica, if you feel like you want to see this story before it goes out, even though usually they sign their rights away to the videos, I'll go back and ping the employer branding or the recruitment marketing person and say, Jessica gave me this very personal story. I told her that we would let her see the story before it goes live. I'd really appreciate if we could do that. And 10 times out of 10, they're always like, yes, of course. We're going to show them the stories and make sure they feel comfortable with it.
That's a great point, Brettany, because I think when it comes to if you as a person can have agency to create those boundaries, that means you have autonomy. So it's a great example of the virtual background. Like now you're seeing my real background of, okay, I live in Rotterdam, but this is what I want to show you. And I love that being an organization, you can point out the way. You can say, okay, this is the green screen, but you can also invite people to share their vacation picture as a background. So it's not showing their clutter in a way in their home, but it's something about them that's meaningful for them, and they can open up in their own terms. Because I think when it comes to story sharing, sometimes we think that we have to be vulnerable, we have to be showing up, but sometimes I don't wanna. If I go to the toilet, I shut the door as well. You don't have to see everything. And it's that dynamic of, okay, if you're taking people seriously as human resource, you have to treat them like adults. So what are the areas that you can put a boundary, but you can also say why you want that boundary? And so where do we meet at the edge? And what discussion is there at the edge? Because if I'm not showing even on camera, how do I communicate with you? Because I need an orient point. So could you put a picture or something like that? And I think we need, especially in the virtual space, but also in the hybrid space, to really think about where do we create boundaries in order to have space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so much of the undertone of what we're talking about is really getting to, in order to get to know people, there has to be, number one, a level of trust, mutual trust and mutual respect, and then also a great level of psychological safety as well. That's definitely key as far as people, sharing or getting more personal, more on personal level conversations. I know something that's come up when we were talking about DE&I at my organization, and teams taking the time to get to do team building, and folks, not having that natural run-in in the break room, but hopefully we will pretty soon, or at least have the option. But there's also the business case, right? Especially so in my organization, we have many folks that, you're billing clients, you're expected to bill a certain number of hours as a business consultant or, an implementation manager or whatever it might be. And that's not uncommon. Even in support, you're tracking your queue and how many cases. So how do you encourage organizations, on a cultural level to kind of marinate and marry, the business needs with the people needs. Because if we're not setting the expectation and the culture and the framework that like it's okay and we value you as people, and we want you to be able to just like behave as humans and take the time to get to know and chit chat and celebrate each other. Because like I get that feedback all the time of I can't come to training because I haven't met my billable hours, or I don't take time to get to know my coworkers because I need to bill more hours, or whatever it might be. Like that's a real issue in a lot of organizations. How do we combat that? Or what do we tell organizations as far as setting a safe place? So it's always going to be a thing, but how do we make it accepted?
I would love to have a go at that one if that's okay, because I want to bridge this question and the last question. There's a piece here about the stories and being able to set your own boundaries. And one way to show people that you trust them and value their voice is something that a lot of companies still don't do. And that's give people the power to talk about their workday on social media, talk about their experience on social media. A lot of these things are coming through the corporate communications channel. We're telling their stories, we're amplifying certain stories. But if we were to give that power to the employees and give them the trust, say, these are the guidelines, please don't share anything confidential. There's some very basic rules that you need to follow, but still you kind of get these messages going, these are the social media guidelines, and people are afraid to put themselves out there. If you have a diverse workforce, it makes sense to let them amplify their own voices, build their personal brands in service of the company, right? It's probably great work happening. There's great collaboration and teamwork and lots of beautiful moments that we'll never hear about as as an employer brand person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. Going back to boundaries, you always want to stay on that fine line of telling stories that are great for the company, but also stories that are great for storytellers. I'll give you a really quick horror story, but like for myself, if I sit down and someone's asking me questions, especially when their questions are around visual diversity. So if you're asking me questions, I expect questions about being a woman in the workplace or being a woman of color in the workplace. But I was asking a storyteller questions, and there was a whole list of pride community questions. And I kept going in that direction, and they were going in general. They were speaking of the pride ERG in general. And then the actual employer branding person said to them, well, as a member of the pride community, can you tell us? And the storyteller responded and said, I haven't came out to my family yet. So no, I don't want to tell you that. So that's setting realistic expectations also with your storyteller. You don't want to tell them, I'm picking you because I want you to tell this story, but give them the guidelines of these are the questions that we're going to ask. Do you feel comfortable speaking on these subjects? And if not, then tell me so we can pivot to a different direction, because in that instance, we were using this person's story for some Pride Month diversity. So we as in the employer branders should have asked the storyteller beforehand if they were comfortable answering those questions. So it's a fine line.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So whether it's, something facilitated like what y'all do at Stories Inc., or just even having like conversations or sharing something on social media, we don't necessarily know what anybody's experience is, right? We don't know what happens at home. We know the quote unquote diversity that we can see, but there's so much that we can't see. And we don't know what those folks have shared with loved ones, in the workplace, outside of the workplace. And it can be hard when it can be challenging, and it can really be devastating if we are working in a context if we're making certain assumptions that like that individual's family, like, well, people at work know, then other people must know as well, and family, but that's not always the case, or vice versa. So that just goes back to the, always checking, always being open, and I think of that as the, not the golden rule, which is treating other people how you want to be treated, but the platinum rule and treating other people how they want to be treated.
That's my favorite statement.
Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I say that all the time. I treat people the way they want to be treated and not how I want to be treated, because we do not all want to be treated the same. So
yeah, I love that. I would love to say as well about the diversity piece. It depends how you categorize yourself. You could be, part of the LGBTQ community or people of color, but it's also about what resonates most with you. I remember when I trained as a coach, one of my fellow coaches said to me, you could be a coach for working mums. And I was like, well, you could be a coach for working dads. It just didn't seem like to make sense to me. Like, why are you looking at me and thinking that would be my niche, right? And lo and behold, it wasn't. I went to the personal branding space and leadership, but yeah, you can't assume that something that presents itself is the most important thing to that person.
Yeah, I love that. And the analogy that I often use is like, it's like if feeding someone, instead of push the spoon in their mouth, it's just like holding. So with the conversation, it's like, hey, would you like a bite? And how do you think that this tastes? Because there's something about the identity part that's very dear to you. And if someone would just come up to you and say, oh, you must be da 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 da, I'm like, hello, conversation. And that's the boundary part. But also, it's when it comes to the individual and the organization, it is also taking care of your people. It is what are you comfortable talking about, but also being clear of, let's say, collaboration or community is a very important value. And instead of me telling you, this is a story you have to tell, it's like, okay, so we have 3 colors of buckets of paints. How would you paint? What's your artwork? And then you can have like a display of different artworks and still with this 3 different colors, but in different combinations. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. We got you got some love in the chat, Sara, that you have the best analogies, which I totally agree with. Shout out for good analogies right there. All right, so we are winding down on time. We are almost to the end. So does anybody have any closing thoughts that you want to lead us out on?
All right, I'm happy to give it a go. I made a note of this one because I thought it was a really great piece, and it says, advocacy has to go beyond having conversations with those that agree with you. I really think that when it comes to this topic, it takes a lot of courage to be disliked in order to make change happen. So be that unpopular opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a quote somewhere that if we surround ourselves with people who look and think like us and just say yes to us, we'll ultimately end up being surrounded by people who have nothing left to say.
I love that.
I think I will end with a sentence that I once woke up with from a dream. And that was, it's in the felt sense of belonging in one's mind, body, and soul that you get to experience the limitlessness of belonging. Because I think belonging is a journey. Because of your ever-evolving identity, it's a process that you keep encountering. It's never done. And that's the work also for organizations. You're never done. Just like having a shower every day, brushing your teeth, it's that keeping the efforts in.
Absolutely. Right. Jessica, Brettany, any closing thoughts?
I just love everything Sara says.
I know. I want her like in my
lecture. We're all on a journey, and no matter where your organization is on the journey, I think as long as you capture employee stories, you can never say the wrong thing, because that's people's perspectives are always true.
Agreed. And then just lastly, of course, diversity and inclusion is not a one post, one message fix. This is something that has to be done continuously. So when you're thinking about having a plan for social channels and social media, and you're thinking D&I, like you're not just thinking Black History Month or Pride Month or Women's Month, like you're thinking, what is our strategy throughout the year, and how can we best display this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is a wonderful note to end on. Thank you all for sharing, for doing this, for joining, for sharing your unique voices and perspective. I was thinking, I love that we have a practitioner with an organization, Jessica and Brettany, who work with outside organizations through their organization to bring out the stories, and then Sara, who's done a lot of work in the business world before, but now is an individual practitioner. So we're just getting all the diverse perspectives on DE&I that we can in the business world. So with that, thank you all for listening in and joining. And I know that there are there's one more session. Our next one is starting with Larissa hosting at 10:35, is doing what you should, blocking your success. So if you want to stay on this track, feel free to head over to that one. And there will be offerings as well. All right, so thank you all. And
thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
Pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.